Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today bringing you my in-depth analysis for both Mafia 3's reveal trailer and gameplay. Yes, a lot of people missed it, but we got some gameplay for Mafia 3, but first I'm going to show you guys the small details I extracted from the CGI reveal trailer and then move on to the gameplay snippets that press outlets were allowed to show and analyze those afterwards. So let's get into what we learned. Mafia 3 is set in New Orleans during the Vietnam War in 1968. You play as Lincoln Clay, who is returning home from said war and is looking for a place to belong, considering he started off as an orphan, he couldn't find this place to belong, so he went to the war, and now he's back home in the black mob. Something he's apparently spent his entire life doing. And in this trailer, we learn that this Italian mobster killed Lincoln's, I say this in quotes, family. Judging by this happy reunion here, then we see the mobster's shoes here amongst all the dead bodies, and then when the mobster dies, we see his shoes here, knowing he committed all these murders and why Lincoln is killing him here. I figured I'd give some context to the situation as it makes the trailer just really impactful. And then finally, we know the faces of these four people. We obviously have Lincoln, but then we have Cassandra, Burke, and ladies and gentlemen, he's back, Vito Scaletta. Yes, that is Vito. We learned this in an interview with IGN, that Vito is back and he has aged well. You are looking great, Vito. And this is great. This means that you guys should all go back and play Mafia 2 because now they're really interweaving stories, because apparently the narrative is going to, these mobsters are going to impact the narrative and kind of influence decisions. Anyways, that's the CGI trailer. Let's move on to the exciting stuff with the gameplay. In the first snippet of gameplay here, we see what is referred to as a cistern in Mafia 3. Basically what these are these hideouts that you can capture and then hand off to one of your criminal lieutenants. And what's interesting about this is that they offer you certain perks and services that are exclusive to each lieutenant. So let's say I give this cistern over to Vito, I get a certain reward that only I can get from Vito, where if I gave it to Cassandra, for example, I get something entirely different. This helps tailor to different gameplay styles and helps influence decisions and stuff. So I thought this was a unique mechanic added to Mafia. It's also a side activity, which is new, considering Mafia 2 was an amazing game when it came to the story, but in the open world lacked zero side activities. So it's good to see that they're adding that in Mafia 3 with this cistern. Now we're getting into the action-packed stuff. Right here we see Lincoln Clay vaulting over cover. This is new to Mafia because in Mafia 2, all you could do was hug cover and press LB to vault certain objects only when the game allowed you. So it's nice to see that they're adding this type of locomotion to the gameplay where I can move towards them and slide into cover whenever I want to. It's a little thing that we came to expect with the game, but nonetheless, it's an addition noteworthy. I'd also like to focus on the HUD that's very reminiscent of GTA. If you look at the map here, we see the health bar on top of the map. The map looks a lot like GTA. It's very GTA-ish. So I found it quite interesting, and I figured that was a comparison worth pointing out. I'd also like to focus on the weapon HUD. It's a lot different now. Instead of using a weapon wheel through the D-pad, we see that the protagonist has both a primary and a secondary weapon, considering he's carrying a pistol and a rifle on him. It's also interesting that we see a type of medicine symbol here, meaning that it's not really regenerative health, as we can tell by the health bar, but more so you have to replenish your own health by investing in medicinal supplies of some form. We see grenades on you. It's all more so of a streamlined sort of mechanic where you're kind of having everything there with you at once. It's all on screen, so you see what's available to access, instead of in Mafia 2 where you were constantly flipping through the D-pad trying to see what weapons you had on you. What I'd like to focus on this screenshot here is the man shooting at you. Judging off the way he's dressed, he's another member of a separate mafia. And the reason this is so important to focus on is because Mafia 1 and 2 were all about going to become a part of the mafia, rising to power, getting the good life, and eventually having it all fall apart, obviously. But what's interesting is that they're taking the fight to the other mobs instead of trying to become a part of them and rise to power, which is very, very different in a mafia game. And I feel like this is something that could have slid under a lot of people's radars. Now we see Lincoln about to perform a brand new move to Mafia called the Charge Takedown, as it's labeled on the left-hand side of the screen. And what's cool about this is that this kind of streamlines the combat even more, where I can run into a melee finisher and then start the combat. And the reason this is important is because a lot of times in Mafia 2, you were it was all stiff in a sense, where if someone came close to you, you'd enter the fist fighting mechanics, which were a little janky, and it just didn't feel right. So it's nice to know that I could charge at someone, take them down, slide into cover, and then get into combat. here we see just how much the camera pulls in when you're aiming down your sights. I like it, but I feel like they should pull it out just a wee bit more, because that was one of the issues in Mafia 2, is that the camera was so far zoomed in when it came to the third-person combat that it really messed up your aim. When you're behind cover, it's a lot better now, you can tell in Mafia 3, but I still don't like the way when you're out of cover, how close up they put the camera to you. I hope they do adjust this a bit. In this screenshot, we can learn quite a bit. Judging by the name of this mission, Operation Pale Horse, we'll assume that this is, in fact, a story mission. With that being said, it's interesting you have the option whether or not to kill or spare your passenger. Whether or not this is an option because you have just hijacked a car is beyond me, but let's say that he is most likely a victim in this operation. I'm going to assume that they're giving you the choice on whether or not you want to kill or spare the victim in this operation. Either you can do what the Mafia says, put your family above everything and follow the rules, or you can let them live and perhaps face the consequences later on. Because I doubt someone who hijack their car, I doubt they're going to sit in the passenger seat and be like, yeah, okay, why the hell not, right? So I assume that he's a part of this mission in some way, so it's interesting that they're giving you that choice. I'd also like to focus on the police radius, which you're going to have to look past IGN's watermark. I apologize. There's no other gameplay out there. But anyways, I like how it's more of a radius. In Mafia 2, it was more so your screen blinked blue, and you'd have to drive as fast away from any blue arrows as you could, and then once you were out of sight, the police would just lose you. So it's interesting now that there's a set radius, and I'm sure that'll expand based on your level of wanted. So I found that there was a lot to take away from this, also because there is a speedometer on the bottom now, but also the rear view mirror is integrated on the top, something that a lot of games should do, because a lot of times they just have you click a button and you just see behind you, and it's so weird, and you can't see what's going on behind you. It's more realistic to actually, like when you're driving a car, glance up in the rear view mirror, see who's behind you, and then go back down. So I really like that they added this feature to see who's chasing you, because apparently car chases are going to be a big part of Mafia 3. Only seconds later, we get something brand new, which is car combat in Mafia. We've never seen this before, especially while in the driver's seat. And what's interesting about this is that more so than anything, the reticle surrounding the tires of the cop car. Now, what's interesting about this is that they've said that you're able to shoot out these tires, and because of the new engine Mafia 3 is using, you'll be able to have these crazy explosions as you're driving around the city, and when you shoot out these tires, the vehicles will roll and they'll blow up and all that stuff. So it's interesting that we can actually see it here live, what it's going to do, and that we're actually going to be able to just use our guns while driving, something that Mafia 2 is really lacking. A lot of times in Mafia 2, you'd have your passengers do the shooting, you'd just be kind of cruising along, just doing all the driving. So it's nice to know that we can get into the action while driving. Now we're seeing a melee finisher, something that we have not seen in Mafia 2. Now in Mafia 3, you just see that Lincoln here stabs this guy to death brutally. But there's two other things I wanted to focus on mainly in this screenshot. Number one is that this building is open and you're able to just walk into it. Like I said, with games today, we've come to expect this, but in Mafia 2, you were not able to do this because of the technology holding it back. Everything was closed off. You just kind of had a city to walk around in, but you could not just openly enter buildings like we see here. It's not marked anything on the minimap. It's just a building there open for you to walk into, which is very interesting. I'd also like to speak of the phone symbol here on the bottom corner of the map. As we can tell, this means that we're going to have the ability to call off the cops and bribe them, similar to Mafia 2 where you're like, hey, I'd like to calm down the situation. That's back again, which is great to see. I absolutely love that feature in Mafia 2. Now we're getting to look at something very cool. As you can see, the text along the top says, Uncle Lou responds to loss of criminal operation. Now, why is that so important to focus on, Matty? Well, the reason this is because as we can see, the people shooting at us here in this gameplay snippet are not cops, they're other gang members. And my speculation here is that most likely we have done some type of side activity to remove some type of power from Uncle Lou, and now dynamically in the open world, he is responding by sending out his gang members to attack us. I thought this was a cool addition to the game nonetheless, because it's just that dynamic feature that you're gonna piss people off and they're gonna attack you openly no matter where you are in New Orleans. During this 13-second segment, you can see multiple things such as the car flipping over, power steering. You can also see the way the rain reflects off the ground. We can see the lighting. There's a lot of technical upgrades here. And finally here, we get a taste of the world we're going to be living in Mafia 3, where we see a Caucasian cop harassing an African-American male for what seems to be no good reason. And this was for the developer to bring the world to life more than everything. They said that they don't want to get on a soapbox or anything and make any big speeches or whatever, but they had to do this type of stuff to bring the world to life because this was the time period they lived in during 1968, and this is how things happened to be, unfortunately. So I thought that it was a bold move, but also an interesting one nonetheless, because they're really taking those chances to immerse you in this world. But nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, that is my analysis for Mafia 3. If I missed anything, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. But most importantly, if you want my impressions on what I think of the entire reveal trailer for Mafia 3, then head on over to the link down below, sugarbomb.com. I wrote my own article there that you guys can check out if you want my full thoughts on the reveal, how I thought it went, was it the smart choice to go with CGI, all that stuff. I highly recommend you check it out. Anyways, be sure to let me know what you're thinking on all this stuff down below. Follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook. Other than that, stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.